Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Mr. Fix It channel. Got the Polaris 400 in the shop today. This is a video request, working on the carburetor. Stay tuned.
I was sitting out there in the shed one evening, not doing too much of nothing, just kind of staring at the wall.
Alright, before you make any adjustments to your carburetor, there's a few things that you want to make sure that are working correctly. And that is, you want to make sure that the reeds are working correctly and that the engine is working correctly, as in it's got plenty of compression and it's not leaking any vacuum. And you want to make sure that your air filter is clean and make sure it's in there. So with those few things said, I'm going to pull the carburetor out, we'll take it over to the bench and we'll talk about it. Now the hardest part about getting this carburetor out of here is taking the air box out. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. Start by taking the air filter out. Loosen this clamp up far enough so you can slip it towards the carburetor. Get that clamp all the way out of the way. What you're going to do is you're going to pull up on the carburetor, pull back on it. You're going to try to slip that boot off the top and just peel that back. That comes right out. Now getting the back end's a little more tricky. You're going to grab it right here with your finger and pull it up like this and set this down in there and try to peel that boot back and around. Then you can stick your finger inside and work that boot up onto the air box. And that's the easiest way I've found to get the air box in and out. So the first thing you are going to want to check is to make sure that your air filter is clean and it's not deteriorated and it's all intact. So make sure you check the air filter. Now I'm not going to remove my reeds because my reeds are fine, but I will tell you there is 6 screws around the perimeter of the intake boot that you have to remove, along with the oiled injection line. So take these 6 screws out and the oil injection line off. The intake will come off. Then your reed cage will come out. There's a gasket on the back side of the reed cage against the cylinder. Before you make any carburetor adjustments, you want to make sure there's no vacuum leaks. So you're going to take something like brake cleaner or starting fluid, and you're going to, while the engine's running, you're going to spray around the intake. You're going to spray around the cylinder base gasket. You're going to spray the crankshaft seal on the left hand side of the machine. The crankshaft seal on the right side of the machine is inside the balance shaft cover and there's oil in there. If that is leaking, you'll be getting excessive white smoke out of the exhaust and it won't last long. It'll suck it out of there, and then when you go to check the oil, there's a dipstick to the balance shaft. That'll be empty if it's already all burnt out. So you want to check and make sure you're not having any vacuum leaks. Also, you're going to want to check, there's another place where vacuum can leak, and that is where the 2 halves of the crankcase come together. So you'll want to spray down alongside the center of the engine and make sure that's not leaking there. There's also the drain screw on the bottom of the motor. It's the one all the way to the left side of the machine on this side. So check to make sure that's not leaking in the crankcase dividing line where the 2 case halves come together. So here's my spare engine. You can see there's a parting line right here. It runs right along the oil injector. You want to spray all along that. Make sure that the crankcase itself is not leaking. You also want to spray some around the spark plug. Just check, be careful. The engine's going to be running. If you have a leaky spark plug boot, this could cause a fire. I would recommend using water, but the effect of water is not nearly the same effect as using something like brake cleaner. And when you use brake cleaner, make sure you're using a flammable brake cleaner. So just spray around here. You'll notice the idle change when you hit a vacuum leak. Now I don't have any of these issues going on with mine. I'm just going to be working on the carburetor, but I want to make sure you understand that you want to have all this stuff working correctly before you make any carburetor adjustments, because it may not be the carburetor. It could be a leak, intake leak. It could be the reeds. So just check, make sure all that is good to go before you even pull the carburetor off. Two strokes are quite a bit different in troubleshooting a running problem than four strokes, because there's so many places where air can come in past the carburetor, and that'll screw up your mixture. It may not even run, so make sure you check all this stuff first. Okay, this is the reed cage. This is what houses the reeds. Now these are very important, and these are vital in how the two-stroke engine works. Some engines are a piston valve. This is a reed valve engine. And what this reed valve does is the carburetor sits on this side and the piston's on this side, and as the piston moves up in its bore, it will create a negative pressure on this side of the reeds, and that will draw fuel air through the carburetor past these reeds, and the more throttle you give it, the more these reed pedals will open. Okay, and these, so while it's running, these are in here fluttering. They flutter rapidly, and these will wear out. There is a spec on how much of a gap that you're allowed to have in these reeds. So just a quick check, if you tap on them, you can hear a difference. See how that one's a little bit, got a little bit of a gap in it. So those are quiet. That one's got a little gap. That one's got a little gap. So to check the reeds, you want to make sure that there's no chunks missing out of them, there's no whole pedals missing, they're not cracked, and if they do have a little bit of gap, then you're going to want to get your feeler gauges out. Okay, you can look right here. It's talking about how to check the gap in the feeler with a feeler gauge. So 15 thousandths is the limit. So find your 15 thousandths feeler gauge, and you should not be able to slip this under that. Fifteen thousandths or 0.4 millimeters. You shouldn't be able to slip this in there. If you can, replace your reeds. This will cause what you would think would be carburetor symptoms. And just as a side note, when you replace the reeds, replace them with the factory reeds, which would be my recommendation. If you do go aftermarket, avoid these carbon fiber reeds. They're going to be the cheapest reeds that you're going to find. These are garbage. Don't buy these. You can also get the V-Force reeds or the Boyson reeds. I recommend the factory reed. Symptoms of bad reeds. It's hard to start. Is usually the first thing you're going to notice, that it's hard to start, especially when it's cold. Is once it's drawn air through the carburetor, these reeds will close and it should not be allowed to come back through. This is like a one-way valve for your engine. If you're seeing, this is the filter side, if you're seeing a lot of gas and oil mix on this side, or maybe your air box is loaded up with gas and oil, that is a sign that your reeds are bad. Also, when you remove your reeds, there should be this part in the reeds. So this is the carburetor side. So when you take the intake manifold boot off, there should be this part in here. This is to help direct the air into the reeds. So make sure this is in there. If this isn't in there, that can cause problems also. All right, I know I'm kind of going on and I'm kind of neglecting getting to the carburetor, but all this is important. So you can see this is the intake side of the piston, and it has these cutouts. The air actually flows past the reeds and in through these cutouts of the piston. Another source of a vacuum leak can be this seal in the cap. See this rubber seal in here? This seal, if you notice, this is my spare part, but if you notice the seal is cracked, can you see that? That seal is cracked. If it's cracked or if this is missing, you'll have a vacuum leak right here at the top of the carburetor. it will allow vacuum to flow past the holes in the slide, and this will also cause a lean condition. Alright, now that we've talked about all of that, let's get on to the carburetor. Alright, finally, here's the carburetor. Now once you get your carburetor removed, it's still going to be full of fuel. On the bottom here, there's a 17mm screw. Loosen this and take it out and let the carburetor drain. Now behind this drain plug, that is the main jet right there. So if you just want to change a main jet, that's all you got to take off. I'm going to put this back on, and when you tighten this, do not tighten it tight. Just get it to where it stops and give it a little It's not going to fall out. Don't worry about it. You over tighten it, you're going to damage things. On the carburetor, you're going to have some hoses. This one on the bottom, this is the overflow. If gas is coming out of this one on the bottom, then that means your needle and seat isn't sealing. This one on the top, this is the carburetor bulb vent. You can see that the hose connects here. It comes down through this channel, down there, and into the carburetor float bowl. So you want to make sure that this isn't stopped up, plugged. You can do that by simply blowing on the end of this hose. You should hear air going inside the carburetor. So make sure this isn't plugged up. Now on your slide, this is the main metering needle. The main metering needle has an E-clip. Now it's kind of hard to see, but there's an E-clip on there, and there's also a little plastic washer. So you want to make sure the washer's on here. And this E-clip has 5 different positions. This clip, if you move the clip up, that will push the needle down into the carburetor, leaning the mixture. Now this only adjusts off idle all the way up to about 3/4 throttle. So about 1/4 throttle to 3/4 throttle is where this needle comes into effect at. You see that it's tapered, and the taper, so the farther this, so it's sitting in the slide like this. The slide has a slot in the side there. See that slot? There is a nub sticking out inside the carburetor, right in there. So that aligns the slide. And as the slide opens, when you pull the throttle, that pulls that needle up out of the needle jet in the bottom, down inside there. And you can see the taper, that the more this opens, the more that it'll expose that jet. And that's how that meters the fuel. So if you move that clip up, pushes the needle down, it will lean the mixture. So if you push the clip down, it'll raise the needle and give it more fuel, enrichen the mixture. That's how that works. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove these hoses. They can be quite stuck on there. So I just want to get these out of the way so they're not throwing things around. Alright, moving on. I'm going to take the 4 screws out to the float bowl. This is a Mikuni carburetor, so it does have JIS, or Japanese Industrial Standard screws in there. And that's usually the cause of why these are always stripped out. So if you're using a Phillips screwdriver and they're too tight, chances are you're going to strip these screw heads out. So make sure you get a JIS screwdriver. A Phillips will take these out if they're not over tight. And we can pull the float bolt off. Now the floats in this carburetor is a little different than most carburetors, where the floats are attached to the bowl. They have these 2 little plastic buttons on here that prevent these from falling off. There's no need to take any of this out. This brass tube inside here, this is connected to the bottom where the bottom hose was going, and if the fuel level gets above this, it will flow out and out the tube. That's the overflow. Now this port here, this is for the choke or enrichener. You can see there's a hole in the bottom, and this is where the enrichener draws its fuel from. It's inside this port here. Now corresponding with that port, this is the straw, the siphon straw. This goes up and into the choke enrichener. The enrichener and the carburetor down in the throat, right there, That's where it draws its air from. It flows through this passageway right here. The choke plunger goes in this hole, and it draws this fuel up through here and into the hole inside down in there. And when you pull that up, air will flow through this hole, past this, it'll draw fuel up, and it'll come out the hole inside there. You see that hole in the side, inside the carburetor there? That is the choke enriching passage. Now if the choke plunger, let me get that out. This is the choke or the enricher plunger. It has a rubber base, and there's a spot for the cable, and there's a spring that holds this all on. If this part is worn, it will also cause a lean condition because it will allow air to flow through this and through the carburetor when it's not supposed to. So that can also cause a lean condition. So if you're rebuilding your carburetor, make sure you replace this also. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take the needle, the float needles out. This pin is tapered, so it's kind of pressed into these posts. These posts are fragile, so be very careful when removing this pin. Sometimes you can get a screwdriver in here and grab it kind of like a nail head. You can see that, kind of like a nail head. I'm going to try to pry this out with this screwdriver. It's pushed in too far for your screwdriver to pry it out. And you can also take a small punch. This is a 1/8 punch. And on the other side from the nail head, you can take your punch and a small hammer and gently tap this out. It shouldn't take much. So you can pull this pin out. Now you can pull the needle valve out. Now the needle valve has a rubber tip. You want to make sure that the rubber tip is straight and there's no grooves in it, and it's actually there. It shouldn't be missing. And on the back side of this, there's a spring-loaded plunger in the back of this needle valve. Now to remove the main jet, you need a 6mm wrench, and simply just thread this out. Now this brass disc here, this is the baffle. So if you look in the bottom of the float bowl, you can see where that drain bolt goes in, that drain plug. The main jet actually sits down in that well, and this baffle kind of plugs that off so the fuel, when the carburetor's bouncing around, it doesn't splash up out of that well and cause a lean condition. So you want to make sure that this baffle is in place. Okay, now I'm going to remove the needle jet, which is this brass piece in the center here. To get this out, you're going to need another punch. You're going to set the carburetor upside down. You're going to set this punch in here. Make sure it doesn't go inside the threaded hole because you don't want to damage the threads. But you're going to set your punch there and you're going to lightly tap this out. You can reach in here and wiggle it the rest of the way. It's in there snug, so you just got to take your time and gently tap that out. Try not to damage it. Now it is keyed. There's a keyway in this, and there's also a key inside here, so you want to make sure when you put this back in, you line this keyway up with the key in the carburetor. Now this is also the emulsion tube. So how this works is inside, this is the air filter side. You can see there's a hole here at the bottom. Air will be drawn through this hole. It'll go through the passageways and into the emulsion area, and air will go through this hole and it will mix with the fuel as it comes up and out this needle jet. The needle jet has a number. This can be tuned and changed. Okay, so the needle jet in my carburetor says 480, and then there's a little Mikuni symbol and it says 0-6. So that's the one in mine. You can buy different ones to change the jetting. Now you can see the metering needle slides in and out of this. You can see how that taper will allow more fuel as the throttle opens. So you can tune the needle, you can change the needle, and you can change the needle valve for tuning purposes. I don't know the availability of these parts. You may not be able to get these parts anymore, but if you look around you may find them. The needle is, these numbers are very hard to read. Okay, now that you've got all this assembled, I'm going to go ahead and take the pilot jet out. Now you're going to need a skinny screwdriver, and it needs to fit the pilot jet slot tightly. If it doesn't fit in there tightly, chances of you stripping this out is very likely. So make sure you get a screwdriver that fits that jet very well. You're going to loosen it and you're going to tip it over in your hand, and then the pilot jet will come out. Okay, now I want to remove the needle seat. This is a 9mm. Now be careful, because these two posts are right next to this. So if you go wrenching on this too hard, when it breaks free, you could break one of these posts off. So just be very careful when you loosen this. You can also use a socket. That'll get you away from these, and that'll make it so you don't break those off. Alright, under the seat there is a little felt gasket. Make sure that's in place. If this isn't in place, gas will leak past this. Even though the valve is shut, gas will still leak past this and it'll overflow the carburetor. Symptom of that is the carburetor overflows whether it's running or not. It's constantly overflowing. You always have to turn your fuel off. Chances are the needle and seat's not working, or this gasket isn't in place. Okay, moving on to the air mixture screw. Now how you know this is an air mixture screw, not a fuel mixture screw, is air mixture screws are going to be on the filter side. See, this is the air filter side, this is the engine side. If the screw was on this side, it would be a fuel screw, and that's important in knowing how to adjust this. So the air screw, you're going to turn it in to make it richer. If it's a fuel screw, you'll turn it in and it'll make it leaner. So this is an air screw, and that's how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and unscrew this. Before you unscrew this, turn it in and count the turns. You can see mine is turned almost all the way in. This will be an indication that you need to do a pilot jet change if this is screwed all the way in. So I'm going to take this out. Then there's going to be a spring that comes out with it. There's the spring. The spring is just there to keep the screw from backing out with all the vibration. Okay, there's a float bolt gasket. If you're not replacing this, be very gentle that you don't tear it, and set that out. This screw here is the idle speed adjuster screw. It's tapered, and it sits in this slot here. You can kind of, if you can see that, you can kind of see the little groove where it's worn into that. And since this screw is tapered, when you screw this in, it will force this up. And that'll give the engine more idle speed, or if you unscrew this, it'll give it less idle speed. I'm going to leave this in place. There's no need to take it out. Now that you got the carburetor completely disassembled, you can do all your cleaning. You're going to want to make sure you get air passage, all the air passage, this one. You're going to blow air through this. It should come out here. You're going to want to blow air through this. You can block this end of it up with your finger. Okay, stick your finger in there, block that hole, blow air in through here, or carb cleaner, and make sure it comes out there. Okay, and you're also going to want to blow air through the pilot circuit. So inside the carburetor, down in there, you can see that little hole there. There's also one more. It's going to be hard to show you that. So the pilot circuit, there's a angled hole right there, and then a straight up and down hole right there. This angled hole, this is adjusted by the air screw. So when the throttle is all the way shut, that's where it gets its air and fuel from, through that hole right there. Now as the throttle is opened, it's going to start pulling from this hole here. This hole here is the pilot. So if you can adjust your carburetor with the air screw to make it idle good, but when you start giving it throttle, it starts stumbling, or if it doesn't want to return to idle, that is the pilot jet. So once the throttle starts to open, it'll draw all of its fuel from the pilot jet, and this screw has no effect or very little effect on the adjustment. So if you're having issues with it stumbling just off throttle, just off idle, then that's a pilot jet. Or if you rev it up and it's hanging idle before it comes back down, that is a pilot jet lean problem. Okay, now I want to talk about carburetor adjustments and tuning. Now, depending on your altitude and depending on the temperature will depend on what jets you need to install into this carburetor. This carburetor is a Mikuni, and it's the VM34SS. VM34SS. I'll put this up on the screen so you can see it. Now, I'm at about 800 feet above sea level. I'm not sure what that is in metric. I'll put that up here somewhere. So this paper says that I need to have, that if I, okay, so from 0 to 900 feet, and it's below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees C, I need a 230 main jet. If it's above, if it's 0 to 40 F, which is 19, negative 19 to positive 6 C, you need a 220 jet. And if you go from 40 to 80 or 5 to 20 C, you need a 200 jet. Now if you're above 80, you need a 190 jet. You can see how the elevation is going to change. So from 900 to 1800 feet, I think that says, it's a little blurry to read, you need a 210. So you can see how you're going to jump from a 230 to a 210 just by going up 1,000 feet in elevation. If you go up another 1,000 feet, you're going to drop from a 210 to a 290. So it's going to be basically 20 for each 1,000 feet that you climb in elevation. If you're all the way up at 3,700 feet, you're going to want a 170 main jet. Now that we're talking about below freezing temperatures here. Now in the summertime, if it gets up above 80s, you're going to have a quite a bit, even smaller jet. So just for instance, let's say at 2,700 feet, you're going to need a 180 main, and that's if it's around freezing. And if you're in the summertime and it's hot, like you're sweating, it's going to be a 150. So the hotter the air is, the less air there is in a given space. If you take a cube, okay, there's so much density in that. And as you heat that up, there's going to be less air in that space, if that makes sense. If you cool it off, there will be more air. The air molecules are going to be more densely packed when it's cold. So when it's cold, you need more fuel because there's literally more air, more oxygen molecules, the colder it gets. Now the higher you go in elevation, the less oxygen is going to be in that cube, so you need to add less fuel. So if you're at a high elevation, say you're at 3,000 feet and it's hot, you're going to need a really small set of jets. Okay, factory jets in this carburetor. Okay, so factory jets in this carburetor is going to be a 145 main, a 40 pilot. The air screw is going to be turned out one full turn, and the needle clip is going to be on the third position for this engine. Now if you have this exact same model of Polaris I have, this is the EC38PL engine. So that'll give you some idea of what jet sizes you need. So if you're at 3,000 feet and it's 80 degrees out, you're going to want you're going to want a 150 main jet. Now this book doesn't give me a reference on the pilot jet or the needle E-clip position. It's just telling me that the pilot jet's supposed to be 30 and 1.5 turns out and on the 3rd position. But that may vary. But that'll give you a baseline. Now currently I am running a 210 main jet and a 37.5 pilot jet. That was for the summer. It is now winter. It's below freezing here. So it's around 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit right now. And it's only going to get colder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add fuel by putting bigger jets in. Okay, I just got a cheap eBay carburetor kit. It came with a new gasket, some O-rings. I got a new needle seat. It came with a new spring for the air screw, O-ring for the drain plug, came with a new needle, came with some new float bowl screws, which is very nice. I got the needle valve and the gasket for the needle seat. I got a new air screw, came with 1 pilot jet, and this size is, haha, they didn't put a size on it. That looks like a 35 or maybe even a 30. So we won't be using that. And it did come with 3 main jets, a 200, a 220, and a 210. So 200, 210, and 220 main jet, and a new E-clip for the needle. There's other kits out there that come with the choke enrichener plunger. I would recommend changing that. As far as my carburetor is concerned, the only thing that I needed out of this kit was the needle valve. There's a lot of vibration in this engine. It has worn the spring-loaded button on top of the needle valve. It's worn it all the way off. It's now flush, so there's basically no spring action in that. And I bought this kit just for this part. I need to check to see if it fits in the needle valve correctly in the old one, and it does not. So I'm going to have to use the new needle seat. All right. So this is the problem buying aftermarket stuff off of eBay. Literally all I needed out of this kit was this needle. I can't use this needle with my old seat, and this seat will not work in this carburetor. It is too small for the threads. This will not thread into my carburetor. So I'm going to have to send this whole kit back, and I'm just going to reassemble this with the old parts. I'll have to order another kit and take this all back apart again, but that's just part of it. So we'll go ahead and reassemble this with all my original parts. We'll stick this in here. Man, I'll tell you what, eBay used to be a good source of Chinese aftermarket stuff. You could get it cheap and it always worked, but anymore, don't tighten that too tight, just get it snug. Anymore, you got to be real careful. I mean, how do you even be careful? Because I don't know. You just got to roll them dice when you order parts off of eBay, and that's why I always recommend getting OEM. But this quad's getting so old, OEM is non-obtainium. So we'll put all this over here. We don't need none of that. So that was a big waste of time. Normally this would be the float. I keep wanting to call it the float, but it's not the float. It's like the tang. So I'm gonna call it the tang. Hang your needle on the tang. Slip that guy down in there. And be careful that you don't put this in upside down, because that'll throw off your fuel bowl level. There's a tab there that goes down. If you see this tab here, make sure that goes down when you install this. And back in. I usually just push it in with my finger, and that's all the tighter I put that in. Now as far as the adjustments, this tang needs to be parallel with the base of the carburetor here. You see mine's down just a little bit, and the reason why I got mine down just a little bit is because my needle is worn out. So I needed to add that space back in there. But you want this tang parallel with the base of the carburetor. That's the float bowl setting. Okay, once you've cleaned this part out real good, you can slip this back in. This goes up, and you want to make sure you line the key and the keyway. Sometimes it helps to slide this onto a punch or something, like so. And this will help you to install it. So just start it in the hole there, and then look down in there and rotate this around and line that key up with the keyway. This should fit in here tight and snug. Tap this in place. You can see right there is the key, that brass, round brass piece, and then the keyway, make sure you line that up. The baffle plate, put that on, It's shaped kind of like a hat or like a brake rotor. So the smaller diameter goes down and the jet goes in through it this way. So the larger diameter's up. So it kind of seats into that. And the main jet is what holds that emulsion tube or the needle jet in place. So when you screw this down, so if you don't have this piece and you screw the jet in there, that emulsion tube can come out. So this works as has two functions. Okay, another thing I want to talk about as far as tuning, my engine is bored over and the head's been milled and I have an aftermarket air filter. Now these different things are going to cause you to use different jets. You can set this to factory, but if your engine or air filtration system has been modified, then the jet is going to be close but maybe not right. So you'll have to just buy a set of jets. Just buy a big bag of these things and start putting jets in. So I'm going to take my what is this, 210? I'm going to take my 210 out for now. I'm going to put a 220 in. Like I said, I'm at 800 feet and it's below freezing. And my engine's been modified. So there's 220. I'm just going to try this. If it runs good, then I'll leave it. If it runs bad, then I'll have to come in here and make another adjustment. Just snug that. Don't go too tight. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about tuning. Now I'll put this up on the screen so you can see it better. But what this is talking about here is how each circuit of the carburetor is affected. So you can see how the pilot system drops off dramatically once you get past a quarter throttle. Past half a throttle, the pilot system has no effect on jetting. You can see how the main circuit comes in at about a quarter throttle, and you get this section here is the metering needle. So you can see the big dashed mark, that is the needle. That's this part, which clip position this is on, and the shape and size of this. And you can see how the small dashed line, when they say the cutaway, they're talking about the slide. You can see how this is cut away on one side. You can also change these and tune your carburetor this way. So that's a little bit more about tuning. I'll go ahead and reinstall my gasket real quick. That's why you got to be careful not to tear that, because if I'd have tore that, I'd have been screwed, because I got to send that kit back. But now I'm going to dig through here and I'm going to find a bigger pilot jet. I was having a problem with a hanging idle. So I'd rev it up. It would rev up just fine, but when it was coming back to idle, it would hang at about 1200, 1500 RPMs, and it would take sometimes a long time to come back down to idle, and when it would come back down to idle, it would chug. That's a lean problem, so I'm going to richen this up probably by a few sizes. It's 35. I had a 37.5 in there. I'm probably going to go up to like 45, I think. Probably going to be the last one I pull out of here. The good thing about buying this set right here came from 12, I think, all the way up to 75. So you can really dial this thing in if you want to. Understanding what the carburetor wants, what the engine wants, is the hard part. Knowing if you need to put a bigger jet in or a smaller jet. And really, there's a 45. The answer to that is, if you're not sure, go ahead and take the carburetor off, pull the jet out, and just go bigger. Put it back in. If the issue gets worse, then you went the wrong way, pull it back out and go smaller than the one you took out. And if it gets better, you can keep going, pull the carburetor back off, put an even smaller one in. If it runs better, continue. But if it starts running worse, then that'll give you the range. So you want to go too rich and you want to go too lean. Somewhere in the middle is where you want to be, if that makes sense. It's all going to be with the butt dyno, seat of the pants. How does it feel when it runs? Other issues with tuning, especially these CVT driven two-strokes, is you gotta set the springs in the clutch. So you get the spring in the primary clutch and the springs and the spring position. There's all you can change the spring and you can change the position of the spring. And that will change the shift points. Depending on how your carburetor's tuned, if your shift points aren't correct, it may act like it's running lean, if that makes sense. So you gotta know how to read the spark plug. All these skills will bring you to give you a good hint on which direction you need to go on your jets when you're tuning your carburetors. It's really just a trial and error thing. And once you kind of understand, like if it's a lean condition, your spark plug is going to be white or perfectly clean, maybe even look burnt. If it's too rich, it's going to be black. You be careful because two strokes, they can make the spark plug look rich, but it's just burning too much oil. So you got to kind of get a feel for it. But basically just go too rich and then go too lean and then go somewhere in between when you're tuning these carburetors. See, I bought 2 sets of these. These didn't go past 37.5, that was the biggest, so I had to buy another set that went bigger. So these are redundant, irrelevant. And I also bought a pack of main jets, just so I can dial this in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put my air mix screw back in. And the settings of this is going to change now because I have put a bigger pilot jet in. Now the book recommends this be 1.5 turns out, and that's what I'm shooting for. I'm shooting for putting a pilot jet in that allows me to turn this about 1.5 turns out. That's how you know you're in the range where you need to be. Turn it to it lightly seats and go 1/2, 1, 1/2. I'm going to leave it there. Once I get this back on the engine, I'm going to start it up and I got to run it up to operating temperature. That's important, especially with the pilot circuit. It's got to be warmed up in the same condition it's going to be while you're riding it. And that may also change for you personally. How do you ride this? Me, I'm getting this thing hot when I'm out there at the park riding hard, climbing hills and all the stuff that we do, all the jumps. You got to get it in that condition to really tune the carburetor in spot on. If you have a wideband O2 sensor, hey, use that sucker. That'll really dial this thing in. Not everybody has a $200-300 wideband O2 system. You get, especially you got to have a snuffer where it goes deep into the pipe, or add a O2 bung into your exhaust. I mean, I'm not going to do that. Are you doing that? I'm not doing that. All right, so last check. I got my pilot jet in. I got my main jet in. That's all tight. Got that set. Put the float bowl back on. I like to tighten these in a crisscrossing pattern, just so it doesn't warp or damage the gasket in some way. I'll just run them down till they stop in a crisscross, and then I'll just snug them up. These don't have to be tight. They're not going to wiggle out. As long as you got them snug, they're fine. Now if you didn't even snug it, they'll wiggle out. But if you snug it, it'll be fine. Nothing in this carburetor needs to be tightened down. Remember that. Especially the pilot jet. It's only got that tiny little flathead spot on it, and it's made out of brass. And you don't just crank down on it. Just run it in there. You'll feel it stop, and just give it a little nudge. It's not going to fall out. You would rather this thing fall out and make the four-wheeler run badly for a little bit, as opposed to getting this stuck in there and never being able to remove it. Throw the carburetor away. It's junk. If you're lucky, you can drill this thing out, but that's just don't tighten it. All right, I want to talk a little bit more about cleaning these jets. What a lot of people do is they'll just look through it and be like, yep, could be able to see through it, but it may have some varnish or something in it, which actually reduces its size. A lot of times you can get a torch tip cleaner. It's got all these different sizes in it. But be careful, because these are like a file, and these will actually file away material in your jet, and which will make it bigger. So use your best judgment on what tool you want to use to clean your jets with. Some people just run a piece of wire through there, whatever they can fit through there, and that can work. A lot of times it's just blocked up with something, and you can just blow through it and that'll come out. But if the carburetor is severely tarnished, the best thing that I can tell you is just to go ahead and buy new jets. You can use these, but you have to be careful with these. Get back together, jeez. What I like to use when I'm cleaning jets is I have a set of micro drill bits. They cover everything from 0.3 millimeters all the way up to 3 millimeters. Now with the smaller jets, these number sizes correspond to the actual size of the jet. So if it's a 45 jet, this 45 drill is the exact same size as that jet. And I'll use these to clean the pilot jets. Now when you get up into the main jets, the sizes aren't going to correspond, because these holes in these jets are not a size drill size. Like that says 270, that's not a 2.7 millimeter hole in that. That is a flow of how much flow will actually go through that hole. Now I've also taken these and drilled jets if I didn't have a jet and I just wanted to make a jet change quick to see if I can make an improvement, I'll just drill a jet out. That's another thing when you're tuning a carburetor that you may not know, because I have drilled jets and I'm sure other people have drilled jets. So even though it says it's a 35, it could be anything. So if the jet is questionable, just buy a jet kit. This is cheap. Go to Google, type in VM34SS, type in that number, and type in after that jet kit, and you'll get these. A lot of them do not tell you what sizes come in the kit. Try to find an ad that tells you what all sizes come in the kit, because a lot of them don't include the sizes. I know that was a lot of information. That was a lot of talking, but I'm trying to cover everything. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comments. I read every single comment. I try to reply or respond in some way to every single comment. So if you have any questions about the carburetor and tuning it, I'll do my best to help you. I try to include everything that I can think of when it comes to making sure that your engine's running right. And the carburetor is a mystery to a lot of people, and it really isn't. All it does is suck. Air flows past here and sucks fuel in. You just got to put the right amount of fuel with that much air going in. And it depends on the temperature, the altitude, how you ride it, engine modifications, everything like that. I'm going to get this thing put back on and fire it up and see if it runs any better. Alright, a couple more adjustments you want to make. The first one is the choke. Now this cable is adjustable. There is a lock nut and the top of this spins. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to start it up, you're going to warm it up, and once it's warmed up, you're going to turn that all the way in. Then you're going to pull your choke out to the first click, not the second click, but the first click, and then you're going to start unscrewing the top of this cable until the engine starts to die. It'll probably go ahead and die, but as soon as it dies, tighten down that jam nut. That'll adjust the choke. Then you can turn your choke back off and it'll work correctly. Now the other adjustment here is the throttle cable on top of the slide. Now you want to adjust this so that you have adjustment on the screw. So you're going to start it up and you're going to start backing that screw out until it dies, and then you're going to take this and you're going to take all the play out of the cable at that point. Once you got all the play out of the cable there, then you're going to turn that back in, start it up, and then adjust your idle speed, which is about 700 to 900 RPM for this machine. If you have your RPM set too high, it'll grind when you try to shift it into gear. So you don't want that. That's bad. If it's idling too low, then it's going to want to stall and it'll be hard to get into gear. You might have to blip the throttle and hold the shifter at the same time, kind of a thing. So you want to get it in that 700 to 900 RPM range. 1,000 is okay, but that's getting a bit high. That's hard on the transmission. There's no tachometer on that machine, so a handy tool is this guy right here. You can pick these up real cheap off Amazon. It's just a little digital tach time meter, and you just wrap that wire around the spark plug wire, and this will display the RPM. Okay, so if you know your carburetor's clean and it doesn't need any replacement parts, and all you want to do is a jet change, you can access the jets without taking the carburetor out. I'm going to show you how. First, you're going to turn your fuel off, take the throttle slide out, and pull the fuel line off. Just clamp out, fuel line off. I'm going to take the choke plunger out. Helps to pull the choke when you do that. Now I'm going to loosen up the clamp on the engine side. Go ahead and get it pretty loose. And I'm going to loosen up the clamp on the airbox side that's on the carburetor. Not the one that's on the airbox, but the one that's on the carburetor. Get that good and loose. And now I'm going to rotate the carburetor over. And now you can take the float bowl off, or if you just need to do a main jet, you just take this cap off. But this is a way you can access the jets without taking the carburetor out, if you're just doing some tuning. Thought that might be helpful. This might have messed up this adjustment, so you want to readjust this cable on top of the carburetor after you do that. Alright guys, well that's everything I know about the carburetor and how to tune it on this machine. If I left anything out or if you have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comment section. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and don't be afraid to fix it. Thanks for watching.